minutes for taking questions and discussion. So now let me see what's on Slack. All right, the first question from Tomek and to Hila. So exam dog, this common envelope object becomes brighter owing to gravitational energy release. Did you take this increase in luminosity into account and when calculating the condensation radius? And Hila already answered, but that she has a question back to Tomek. So can you read? Can you comment on that, Hila?
Yeah, yes, of course. So we did not simulate the radiation, but it is indeed very important for a complete simulation and the calculation of the ejection with the dust-driven winds. Because you're right that it will increase the luminosity, as we said, as a part of the accretion energy. And should I answer the second question too?
Yes.
Okay, so
the second mean from Emma Visa or?
no, of Tomek, but you didn't read
Yes,
it.
yes, yes, please. The second question about which type of dust did you consider? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yes, oh, please.
we took a condensation temperature of about 1500 Kelvin, which is approximately the value for silicate, graphite, and amorphous carbon grains. But it is right that there are probably more types of grain and also mixes that should be considered. And in any case, this is actually much below the temperature of the gas during the spiral in the simulation. So we should simulate this for a longer time scale process to allow thermalization and the dust formation for any type of grains. And in our paper, we put the complete calculation so that it can consider actually different types of temperature and also different dependence of the absorptions on the wavelength of the radiating core.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then next question again to Hela from Emma. Thanks for the interest talk. And could you comment on the TZO formation? More specifically, could an RSG absorb a neutron star without having its envelope ejected? Maybe you can explain what TZO objects are and then answer her
Yeah,
question.
so the TZO stars are Thorn Citron, which are red giants or red supergiants that have a core of neutron star. So probably the release of enough accretion energy can slow down the spiral and may prevent the formation of such stars. But if the envelope is not completely ejected from the system during the spiral in, as it should be for the dust-driven winds mechanism, or for some reason it affects only the outer envelope more than the binary orbit, it may still allow such condition. And I think it is still another open question.
Okay, thank you. Now, a question from Joya to Catherine. Could you please comment on your plans to use coronagraph on the ground or, for example, on JWST?
Yeah, so I haven't, to be honest, I haven't thought too much about JWST because that was all happening when I was applying to postdocs and finishing up my dissertation. I know that I have some collaborators that do a lot of fun coronagraph stuff, and also just looking at kind of high spatial resolution imaging of red supergiants. I, along with some collaborators at Lowell, including Gerard Van Bell, who I believe is here, have looked at some galactic red supergiants with Quizy to try and see if there's anything fun and exciting that we can see around them. And so I do think that there's a lot of kind of fun high spatial resolution direct imaging that can be done with these objects, especially because the galactic ones are closer by. But in terms of fun JWST stuff, that is something that I'm looking forward to delving in the future. But I know a lot of people have a lot of really fun things that they have planned.
Okay, thanks. Now a question from Marcus Witkowski. To Catherine, very interesting talk. I understand that you are not considering all stars. I did not get why you are not considering lake type stars as companions like two red supergiant or no, red supergiant with a red giant.
Yeah, so in terms of kind of the more evolved stars, so like a red supergiant with another red supergiant or a yellow supergiant over Wolf-Rayet star, those are systems that just are very short-lived. And so the likelihood that you would find two together is incredibly rare. I will say that for kind of the hotter, like a Wolf-Rayet companion to a red supergiant, we do believe that we have a very good grasp on the number of Wolf-Rayet stars, and we have spectroscopy of most of them, and none of them appear to have red supergiant companions. In terms of the cooler stars, so a red giant or kind of a main sequence, you know, sun-like star, just the timescales don't work if you're assuming that they formed kind of at the same time out of the same dust or gas cloud. The amount of time that it would take anything less than, say, a 2 or 3 solar mass star, depending on environment and metallicity and all that fun stuff, to reach the main sequence is much, much longer than the time that it would take for a red supergiant to form and go through the OB binary or the OB phase and then evolve into a red supergiant. So it's just that these massive stars are so short-lived that lower mass stars won't have formed yet, which is why I think that if we want to learn more about what kind of the lower mass companions would be, we really need to look at them in terms of protostars as opposed to something like a red giant on the main sequence.
All right, and there was a thread about this question, but I guess Catherine has already answered or settled the questions. Now let's go to the next question from Sainier Tomeyer. I don't know, probably I'm not pronouncing the name correctly. To Catherine, thank you for a great talk. I would like to give you a further read on to your 2021 paper. Has it been published yet? Also, I was wondering if type 1a supernovae should be considered part of the supergiant binary fraction.
Yes, the paper has been published. I can put that in the Slack. I don't quite understand the question about whether a type 1a supernova, do you mean just by looking at the populations of type 1a supernova and whether that fits into the prediction for the red supergiant binary fraction? If you clarify a little more in Slack, I'm happy to answer it, but I don't know if I quite understand the question. Or it looks like Yako has raised.
Can I? Okay. Kashi?
Yes.
Okay, because you're in charge. No, just to follow up on that, because it is an interesting comment to look at basically the supernovae and the fraction of stripped envelope systems that were discussed early in the week. They provide, of course, also constraints, as well as unless we're talking about very rare systems, you could constrain how many there would be or what fraction would become certain systems by looking at all the other ones. So what are the other outcomes and how many do we see of those? If it doesn't leave any room for many, for instance, red supergiant compact object binaries, then there can't be many. But if it does, then there might be many more than we know of.
Yeah, that's not something that I've personally looked into. I see that it was that is what the question was. So I guess I would label that an area for future work.
Okay. So the senior, the original question. Do you think she answered your question? Okay. She says yes on Slack. So let's go to the next question from Jaco. Just wanted to draw your attention to the vast amount of work done on symbiotic binaries with red giants or AGB stars, and also Roberto Ortiz's 5-minute reading on X-rays and ultraviolet. Jaco, would you like to add a comment on that?
Not really, but because among the less massive systems, there's a lot known and understood, and so this can also inform how more massive systems might need to behave. It's just to bring a bit of synergy between the two mass ranges.
All right, so then the next question from Lee Patrick to Catherine, and maybe this is a bit of a mean question, but what is the observational evidence that the VV-CPI has a B-type companion? I think I'm right in saying that we don't see any signature of such a star in the ultraviolet spectra.
So I admit that I am not the best person to ask this question to. I mean, Phil Bennett would know a lot more, but I do believe that it is eclipsing and that it does have a signature. I thought that some of the silicon lines from the B star were detected in the UV. I have been working with some collaborators, including Phil Bennett, to do follow-up UV spectroscopy of systems that appear similar to VV-SEP, and that was the kind of looking at the UV spectrum helped guide us to figure out what we would need to try and characterize the B star companion. Certainly, I mean, in the optical, the light and just everything from the red supergiant kind of drowns out the B star. I'd have to take another look, but I was pretty sure that you could see the signatures from the B star, enough for them to classify it as an early B dwarf in the UV, but that's something that I need to look further into.
Okay, about this question, there are some discussion on thread. So Lee asks, could there be, for example, a compact object lurking in there? And Ben Davis and Tomek reply. So maybe
KG, sorry, just
yes?
to let you know, Roberto Ortiz raised his hand, so I allow him to talk. Maybe he wants to add something as well.
Sorry, who?
Roberto Ortiz.
That's me.
Ah, okay, yes, okay, sure.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. No, just a quick comment about how to find, let's say, hidden companions to red supergiants. I faced the same problem with looking for companions of AGB stars. And because they are not supposed to have a corona, they're not supposed to emit in X-rays as well. So I would suggest to do the same with the supergiants, the red supergiants. Look for X-ray emission, because that would be a signature that something goes on out there, like, for example, an accretion disk or some very, let's say, hot companion. I think Catherine mentioned that in her talk. I'd like to strengthen that. Go ahead with it. I mean, I found eight X-ray AGB stars, and this is completely unusual. This is completely unexpected. To date, there are, let's say, 24 of them known. After my findings, we have now 32 or 33. It's very rare. I think this could work for supergiants, red supergiants as well.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. And our limiting factor so far, as I understand it, is that we finding red supergiants in our own galaxy is difficult because of reddening. We now know distances with Gaia, but getting the number of red supergiants because of very variable reddening is difficult. So the number of confirmed red supergiants in our galaxy isn't actually that high. I mean, I think we're less than 1,000. And so just trying to find some of those with X-ray emission is difficult. There has been one that was discovered back in, or was published, I think like November 2020 by Hinkle, that was a red supergiant with X-ray that is thought to have a neutron star companion. And so this is why I'm really excited about eRosita, because currently the spatial resolution on the X-ray surveys that we have is not great enough for the Magellanic Clouds. If you have something that tells you something within like an arc minute or two, that doesn't do much for the Magellanic Clouds. But with eRosita, hopefully we should be able to get that down to the point where we can identify red supergiants with X-ray emission, because we now know pretty well the red supergiant content of these galaxies. And so what we're really waiting on is the X-ray data at this point. But I totally agree. I think this is definitely kind of the best path forward for that.
Is my mic on?
Yes.
Okay. No, I would like to tell you that I carry out a search for X-ray emission in the LMC, but I found nothing. And I think this is because, it's, as you said, it's too far, it's beyond the detection limit. So I don't think it could be very successful. I wish you luck, of course. I wish you luck for everybody, but it will be difficult.
There is also Rudy. Hi, Rudy. Do you want
Hello.
to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to say we did look for X-rays from VY Canis Majoris. We had a couple of observations, XMM and Chandra, and then we got this really deep XMM observation too. That was like hundreds of kiloseconds that was completely took us by surprise because it was like rank C, but it just actually got observed and we couldn't find anything. In the Chandra observation, we thought we saw something in the XMM observation, but when we compare it to the Chandra observation, we see that it's actually just a diffuse emission coming from probably single stars in the vicinity. But it's really hard to detect it because as was mentioned, they're not supposed to be chromospherically active. I'm sorry, coronally active. And so the source of X-rays would probably be, if there could be, would be buried in all of that circumstellar material.
Yes, so isn't that considered, I was under the impression this was more for looking for stars that have compact object companions, and that's what is going to create the X-ray, as opposed to just like single stars. So was this to just look at VY Canis Majoris in the X-ray, or was this to like search to see if there was a compact object companion?
We were hoping to detect X-rays from VY Canis Majoris.
I see, okay.
Yeah, we were hoping we didn't detect anything.
All right, so at the moment I see nobody raising the hand, so we go back to the Slack. And okay, so we were talking about VVCPI, and then there was a little discussion about this system, and then the Patrick raised the question that if there might be a compact object lurking in there, and Ben Davis replied, and that is it a transiting system, VVCPI? And then if it's a transiting system, a compact object wouldn't give you much of an eclipse. Do you know if it is a VVCPI is a transiting system?
Again, I would have to look further. I believe it is, but that's not something I know off the top of my head. Yeah.
All right, and then
I think
Tomek
Wikipedia says it is, but that's about the limit of my knowledge.
Yeah, okay, so the Leaf says that it's in an eclipse system, and then so as Ben says, it's if it's a compact object, it wouldn't give you much of an eclipse. And then Tomek said emission line also said emission lines are too narrow for compact object. So now let's go to the next question, actually a comment from Tomek about dusty red supergiants. Maybe Tomek, can you speak yourself? Can you unmute him? Tomek is not there, or I don't know. Yes, he's there. Okay.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, guys. Just a quick comment to actually, I was thinking about VY Canis majoris specifically. So in case of those very dusty red supergiants, you have lots of dust that can enshroud the companion. So there would be no optical or harder emission coming from the B-type star. In the infrared, it will be very difficult to spot it because the infrared excess is nothing compared to the luminosity of the red supergiant. So we may be missing the companions to the most dusty red supergiants. Maybe Catherine would like to comment on this, but that's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why we're using the UV. And so infrared we use for trying to find the number of red supergiants and kind of locate all of the systems. But when we're looking for companions, we're using UV photometry, or at least U and B, so blue optical.
The UV would be even worse, right? I mean, you would be completely, the companion would be completely enshrouded in dust, so the extinction would be enormous. You would not get any signal from the B-type star.
I mean, I can point to my papers. We do very clearly see that the red supergiants that have a B star companion have excessive U and B blue excess. I also did a bunch of modeling to look and determine what type of B star, given a dust law, given different amounts of dust, the red supergiant spectrum could hide, like how much, if you could hide like a B9 dwarf or something in the spectrum. But definitely in the UV or with kind of bluer photometry, if you have a red supergiant that has a B star in its system, that B star is going to show up to some detectable limit, and then you can statistically correct for the systems that you wouldn't see. And you can do this, just by looking at various systems. I mean, we found 250 of them, so you are able to at least find a fair fraction of them. And I can point to my papers, but I'm not as concerned on that large of a scale that you're not able to at least accurately determine your completeness rate because of dust.
Excellent. Thank you, Catherine.
Hi, if I can jump in for a second. The question of VVC and what you can see in the UV, I was kind of concerned after Patrick raised this very interesting question. And just as Catherine said, I'm now looking at Wendy Bauer's 1991 paper, and you can very clearly see the carbon-4 1550 resonance line in the UV and the silicon-4 resonance lines. These aren't coming from a compact companion. These are coming from the B star. And so there's a very clear spectral signature of the B star in the UV. I'm not sure what raised the question to begin with. Thank you.
Casey, you are muted.
Yes, Jaco raised the hand.
Just to follow up on what Philip just said, so I put in the Slack, XX off was an example as well, where you know there should be a hot companion because you see it in the excitation and the chemistry in the envelope. So you don't see it directly, but you see the effects of its presence. And I also put in a Slack, I don't know if Igor Sosinski is online today. He was early in the week, but he has a recording, I think, also on it. Long secondary periods, which are quite well known among AGB stars and red giant branch stars. They're caused most likely by companions, and you might be able to see them in red supergiants too. obviously, as was pointed out, the timescales are decades, but maybe we can draw again on things like the VSO database and look for such evidence there.
Yeah, one thing
Don't
I'll say
necessarily
really
have to always look in other galaxies. We might have some on our doorstep.
one thing, and I'll put a plot in Slack because I find it super interesting. Even if you're looking at, I believe it was 31 sig, you really need bluer wavelength photometry to see any sort of evidence of a companion, because the red supergiants themselves are so variable. If you're just looking in V over time, which is what most people are, or infrared, then you just see the variation from the red supergiant, and it isn't until you look in U, like not even really B, but U, that you actually see the dip because of the eclipsing system. And so I spent a long time trying to find evidence of binarity in the variability, and was very soon, I didn't find anything, and then found this interesting plot that I'll put in the Slack that shows that at least for the red supergiants, you really need blue wavelength, long, like decades long baseline photometry, which is harder to find.
Yeah, so that's different from how these long secondary periods are found in the lower mass red giants. So there you can see them in the near infrareds, in the light curves, and it's simply because the red giant star itself is responding to the companion in that way, and that's what you're seeing then. So you're not looking for light from the companion, but you're seeing the effects, whether it's deformation or effect on the pulsation mode, etc. So as we're dealing with red supergiants, that could also be taking place there, but you're dealing with the longer time scales.
Yeah, I think also just there's so much in the red supergiant variability due to the pulsations, the convective cells, that even trying to disentangle all of that to get to the binarity is what also makes it a really difficult problem, just because they're so crazy as a single star.
Okay, so the Igor Sochinsky is not here, so, or I don't, or somebody raised the hand. Oh,
Igor wants
no.
to speak.
Oh, yes. Can you comment on that?
I'm here. Yes,
Yes.
I'm here. So long secondary periods are also.
Yes, and the question was the related to your 5-minute talk on the secondary period of long the AGB stars. What about supergiants? Was the question.
Yes, long secondary periods are observed in red giant stars, AGB stars, RGB stars, and red supergiant stars also. And in our model, the long secondary periods are caused by the obscurations of the star by a dusty cloud, which surrounds a low mass companion. So you cannot see the companion itself, but you can see the eclipses by a dusty matter which surrounds this companion. And it can be seen in the light curves very well. In 30% of red giant stars, I'm not sure what is the fraction in red supergiant stars of long secondary period stars. Unfortunately, red supergiant stars are generally saturated in the ogle data in the Magellanic clouds. That's why we generally study red giant stars in Magellanic clouds.
Okay, yes, thank you. So the next question on Slack, we still have 4 minutes left. The next question on Slack is from Jago. Systems such as XX or Fukai must have a hot companion because it's seen in the excitation of the envelope and chemistry in the envelope.
Yeah, so that's what I was just already mentioned.
Yeah.
We covered that already. But a point that was basically skipped over a little bit is how many stars are prevented from becoming a red supergiant? And what is the fraction of stars that would, as a single star, have become a red supergiant, but that are not because of the companion?
Do you mean so that just in the OB star phase, there's a companion, and then I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I mean, I know that a lot of mergers do occur in just kind of, you know, blue stragglers at the OB phase, but I don't actually know how much has gone into looking at what percentage then gets, you know, gets to the point where it enters a system, you know, you get like a stripped star or something. I mean, I know that's kind of the big exciting thing that everyone's looking into, or the stripped stars. So I don't know off the top of my head, maybe someone else can. If
we count the number of red supergiants that we do see, do we find them all, or are we missing many?
I think for that, you need to know the number of OB stars, which we don't know at all. And so we now are getting a better sense of the number of, you know, red and yellow supergiants, but determining the number of OB stars on a large scale down to some limiting mass is very difficult, because you can't really do that using optical photometry. You need UV, which is hard to obtain, and you really need to better constrain, you know, to get just say 8 solar mass, 8 initial solar mass and higher, you need a lot more than what we kind of have right now. I think in clusters you can look into it, and I do believe we see, you know, about the right red to blue ratio, but it's kind of, you know, that's something that is still very much an open question, and not something that we are able to do on large scales like the local group galaxies.
Okay, so on Slack, Ricardo Doda put an answer to Jacob's question, but I could read it, but maybe Ricardo wants to comment on that. Can you raise your hand, Ricardo, so that they can unmute
have
you?
allowed him to talk, but he wrote on Slack that he doesn't have his microphone on.
Okay, yeah, so then the answer from Ricardo is he says, I remember that the expected fraction of interacting red supergiant plus B stars is about 1% of the red supergiants. So probably we should expect the systems of aborted red supergiants plus companion about that fraction. And Lee Patrick put an answer or comment about this issue. On the number of masses, he put some reference about the number of massive stars expected in the SMC. Or Lee, do you want to comment on that? Although we are running out of time, if it's quick. Can you unmute him?
Yeah, can you hear me? Perfect. Yeah, I just sort of wanted to comment on what Catherine was saying there about the number of sort of massive stars expected in any sort of given population. And the paper that I've put there is a very recent study that sort of looked at what one expects from such a population in the SMC. And it looks like there's a lot of massive stars, and red supergiants in particular, that we don't see. So as Jaakko mentioned, I mean, maybe one of the explanations for this is the fact that a lot of, you know, like the figure Catherine showed from Sana et al. 2012, a lot of O-type stars are born in close binary systems, which means there's going to be a lot of those kind of stars that would have been red supergiants that never became a red supergiant. And I mean, I suppose to sort of calculate the fraction, you'd need to look at things like the merger stars in the O-type star sample, all right, and the interacting stars, because typically we know from Jan Eldridge's study in 2008 that any sort of interaction or any sort of interaction within the red supergiant phase is going to be pretty bad news for red supergiants. So it acts to sort of remove would-be red supergiants. So you're probably talking at least 30%, right, of O-type stars that would have evolved to the red supergiant phase.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment, Lee. Okay, so then we are running out of time, but Rob, is there a comment or question? So okay, so this will be the last question or comment on this session. And then could you speak, Rob?
Now I should be able to speak.
It works. Fantastic. No, I just want to say that we had a paper back in 2008 that Eldridge and I and Chris Stout wrote, where we looked at the number of interacting red supergiants. And also I did some work a couple of years ago on thick disk stars, looking at the chemistry in them as well, the carbon to nitrogen ratio, to show that there's about 1 to 2% of them. Now they're much lower mass, but of course, in Sana's paper, we used my code to show how many stars should interact. Now we only did this as a bulk population, but if anyone really wants these numbers, I can easily calculate them. But please get the question exactly right. If you're going to say how many interact or how many merge, how many have mass transfer, I mean, everyone's asking a bit of a different question. And so the statistic will be slightly different. We've got to be precise on this. And of course, to compare to Catherine's observations or something like that, I've got to compare it to observations. It's really hard as well, but these selection effects might be quite a bit of a pain. But that's something I think we should do, and we could quite easily.
Yeah, I've been working on that a lot. I also work with Jan Eldridge and have been comparing a bunch of what I found to exactly what BPAS models predict, and working on publishing that as well, but doing something very similar to what you just suggested, because I know exactly what I've observed. So I'm able to kind of do the BPAS models to very exactly match the observations, and finding very, similar and interesting things. So,
to go back to what someone asked earlier about the 1A supernovae attached to these, I mean, I don't think they're exactly related, but we can definitely calculate numbers of pretty much everything in the code. It's not a problem. I don't know how useful those are for people, though. I mean, is this something I should actually sit down and work out and publish? Is this something you could use? If I put it in a form you could actually use very quickly in Python or something like that, would that be good?
I'd be happy to talk to you more. It's also something that I've done as well with Jan Eldridge for, I think, very similar to what you did with the lower mass stars. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what's new in that. That's the thing. So I don't. We'd have to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, so then we are 5 minutes late behind the schedule. So, but thank you again for both speakers for the very nice, impressive talks, and also all the participants for very interesting, exciting discussion. And so, are there any comment announcements from Jacko and Joya?
No, thank you very much, KG, and we resume at 40 past the hour. So in 25 minutes, 24.
Just to say that we still don't know what will happen when the sun becomes a red giant and swallows the Earth, or what Jupiter might do to it.
There are quite a few papers on this.
Yeah, let's talk about it on Slack.
Yeah.
See you later.